Welcome to another episode of Wine Guide TV. I'm Ben Edwards and this is Dan Sims.
Thank you, Ben.
And we're here to walk you through another little Bledisloe showdown.
Well, considering the whole thing is about Australia versus New Zealand, I mean, they do different types of grape varieties, obviously. We've done Chardonnay. Today is going to be all about Cabernet blends. To see, different styles and different characters and how we compare between Australia and New Zealand.
The inspiration for this comes from the fact that there's a bit of a push in Hawke's Bay to take a bit of the market share from our very good Cabernets in Australia, and so I wonder if they're up to the challenge. It'd be interesting to see. I'm fortunate enough to judge at the Hawke's Bay Regional Wine Show. It's the only regional wine show in New Zealand. All the other ones are national wine shows where the wines come from all around the country. It's a beautiful part of New Zealand. It's it's the fruit bowl. So the Cabernet blends all come from there, apart from a little exception, Waiheke Island. But for the sake of the argument today, we are only going to concentrate on Hawke's Bay.
And also on the flip side, we're going to say the region that we're going to actually compete up against is actually Margaret River. Of course, the Cabernet is grown pretty much everywhere in Australia, but in terms of styles and characters, we thought, why not have a go at Margaret River versus Hawke's Bay, region against region, country against country.
Yeah, a bit of biff coming up.
Bit of biff.
The other thing too is that you've got to remember Margaret River's gone through not as many hard times over the last few years. 07, 08 and 09 were fantastic years for Margaret River, whereas they've been a bit of a struggle for South Australia and for Victoria, where a lot of Cabernet comes from. So there's the rationale. We've set the scene. Let's get stuck into it. Hayshed Hill. Hayshed Hill producer, they do different quality levels, and this is their entry wine, is it not? Yes,
yep.
It's their 2008 Cabernet Merlot. Dan?
Well, looking at the wine in the glass, and it has definitely got that sort of leafy character to it, which you definitely see with Cabernet, and definitely have
it's
touch of...
Look, it's a terroir thing. Margaret River does have those mould leaf, sort of cigar boxy, cedary characters. For some people that might be a bit green.
For me, I'm probably hitting to the more on the green sort of side, and that's not my style of Cabernet, but I still appreciate the structure and element to it.
I do too, and in fact I'll go one step further. Having liked the wines in the past, and this is the first time I've seen this vintage, this one's just not as fresh as I'd like it to be, given that it's an 08, and what I consider just a slightly stale character. It still looks varietal, it still looks like Margaret River, but it's not really punching through and giving me the brightness that I want to see on the finish. So on the back of that, we've got to give it about 87 points. Still a nice wine, 87's still a good drink.
Yeah.
But maybe not quite as good as we'd expected.
Anyway, but moving on, we're going to the Tay Marta, and this is their Woodthorpe. Now, they are from Hawke's Bay, but they don't actually have their vineyards on the Gimlet Gravels, do they? Because they really don't think that it's, all this press and media and all this sort of stuff about the importance of those Gimlet Gravels. They're going, you know what, that's only part of its story. But for this particular wine, Merlot dominant, this is actually pretty interesting.
A very interesting wine, and truly a medium-bodied example of the style. So we're talking red fruits, spices, plums, although I don't know how often you see plums in wines, but we do always talk about it. But it has that lovely sort of ripeness.
It's also got that sort of kind of almost like a bloody iodine-y sort of minerality and backbone to it as well. So it makes it a really quite nice and fresh drink. And these two wines are both similar price points, and I quite like that Tay Marta, and I'll be getting it into that 90-point range.
It's pretty poised, and the blend is really based on a blend you might expect to see from the right bank in Bordeaux. Yep. So it's soft and it's forward and it's supple. But it's still drinking very well. Precise indeed, that one.
Heavyweights, two heavyweights, going against the Cullen and going up against the Craigie Range, the Sophia blends. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Cullen wines.
Well, that's because Vanya's terrific.
Because she's fantastic. She's making great wine. It's a fully sick, 100% BD, biodynamic. They've actually now got certified. They've actually got a certification badge on the back of the label now, which I haven't seen in sort of previous vintages. But, again, you're seeing that life and vibrancy you tend to see with these Cullen wines. It's an interesting...
12.5% alcohol. So this is at the low end of the spectrum, even, well, just about for anybody with Cabernet. But that would have been like a traditional number that you'd expect to see from Bordeaux in the past. There's still plenty of weight, there's still plenty of texture, and in fact, texture is the thing that drives this wine more than anything. It's not in your face, it's restrained.
I actually think it builds and builds and builds as it hits the palate. It's not super, up front in your face, but it's subtle. It's sort of going and going and going.
It's a sleeper.
In
fact, I think it really needs a bit of time and will put on weight and body. But the thing that really attracts me about this one is how fine those tannins are. It's actually very tannic, but the tannins are so fine, like really fine sandpaper.
But almost refreshing as well.
Absolutely, and that's what's going to make that wine live for a pretty long time. and live gracefully, I reckon.
Yep.
I think it'll take a little bit of time to evolve. So we're sort of 94, 95 points. Some people haven't been as kind on that wine, but maybe they're not looking into the future of that wine. You need to do that now.
But sorry, before one step, because it's a biodynamic wine, I checked on my Fully Sick BD calendar earlier, and apparently it's a leaf day. So maybe that's why the hay shed's looking a little bit leafier than normal, and maybe that's why it's looking a bit restrained. I don't know. Maybe wine looks different on different days. It's up to you whether you believe it or not.
Now, moving away from the biodynamics, Sophia, Craigie range, actually owned by an Australian family, the Craigie range. And these Craigie range wines, no expense spared, lots of new oak, incredibly good fruit, and they are on the Gimlet Gravels. Now, they truly believe that some of the best fruit comes from there. This wine is from the 2008 vintage. A difficult vintage, actually, not one of the best ones, but still. Again,
you're looking at that structure and finesse to it. It's got body. It's tightly wound. There's some really good fruit, medium bodied spectrum. You know, that's a really impressive. I've always been a bit of a fan of these Sophia wines, and consistency, I think, is really what that's about.
And again, this is Merlot dominant. And the story in this is that the Australian wines tend to be Cabernet dominant. The Hawke's Bay wines tend to be Merlot dominant. It's because Merlot ripens earlier, Cabernet ripens later. It's warmer in Australia and cooler in New Zealand. So that's why you have those things. I've got to say, Dan,
it's a tough call between these two wines. Because what are you going to point the Craigie range at? I mean,
94.
That's 94. Yeah,
I don't think it's quite the 95 or 96. In fact, I gave 96 to the 07. I don't think it's quite at the level of concentration. But overall, given our points, and we can see them here, I think our friends from across the Dutch have taken it out on the back of the consistency of Merlot. So those people out there, and we happen to be some of them, that bag Merlot, maybe Merlot's not quite as drab as it can
in
seem.
New Zealand, perhaps. But I think all these styles, really fantastic. Think about Cabernet, think about medium bodied.
Think about lamb.
Think about lamb. What's for lunch?
Lamb. And on that note, for another Wine Guide TV, cheers.
Cheers.